How often have you found yourself super excited to make a big change, something you really want to have happen, only to find yourself slipping right back into those old patterns? For example, that moment when you decide you are going to overhaul your sleep routine. You're going to go to bed earlier. You're going to wake up earlier. You're going to feel more refreshed, have so much more time during the day. And so you make a plan and you map it out and you are genuinely excited for this new possibility. Maybe you even stick with it for a day or two. But before you know it, you are just fighting with yourself to wake up, and you find yourself continuously hitting that snooze button over and over. You feel super sleepy, super groggy in the morning. What in the world is happening? Why is this so easy to do? Well, my dear ADHD brains, essentially, it is a version of homeostasis at work. Your body and your brain, they are wired to pull you back to what is familiar. In this specific example, your circadian rhythm is not quite on board with the plan of waking up earlier, even though, again, it's something you genuinely want to do. And today, on episode 298 of the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast, we're talking all about this. We're talking about why it happens, and more importantly, how we can break that cycle and start creating the changes we want to see. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled that you're here. Today, we're talking about change, and we're talking about it through the lens of homeostasis and the way that our body is wired to really keep us doing the same things, and to help us understand why that is, so that we can stop getting so frustrated with ourselves when that resistance inevitably happens. And then also what we can do to help move through that resistance and start making the changes we want. So let's start by talking about homeostasis. What is this? So at its core, homeostasis is essentially our body's way of maintaining stability. And you can think of it like an internal thermostat, where it's constantly adjusting things behind the scenes to keep us in balance, whether that's literally regulating our body temperature or managing energy levels or our sleep patterns. Homeostasis is always at work. And what I think is really fascinating here is that we don't have to think about it. Homeostasis constantly makes all of these tiny little adjustments to keep us comfortable, to keep us functioning in the way that the brain thinks is quote unquote right. And in most situations, this is incredible, and I'm so glad that it works this way. You know, if you think about temperature regulation, when you step outside, if it's super cold, your body starts shivering. This is how your body naturally balances, because it's trying to generate heat, right? So it's kicking in to try and warm you up because it's cold outside. Or if you're in the heat for too long, you start sweating to cool your body down. Your body is always working to keep you at that 98.6-ish degrees. Or our blood sugar, our energy levels. If you think about those times, maybe when you've slipped into hyperfocus for a really long time, you kind of forget that you have a body and need to eat, okay? And then you finally come out of it. Maybe you're a little cranky. Maybe you have a headache or you get a little lightheaded or something. That is your body signaling that it's low blood sugar, and it's trying to trigger those hunger cues so that you go refuel. Or on the flip side, if you eat too much sugar, your body naturally releases insulin, most of our bodies do, to bring those levels back down. Okay, these are automatic processes. Your body isn't asking you if you want to start sweating to cool down or crave a snack. It just does it to maintain that balance. Now, here's where I think this gets interesting. We can see a similar version of this seeking of stability when we're trying to adopt our new habits or new routines, new behaviors generally. Your brain craves the familiar. So if you've been hitting the snooze button for years, your brain is going to expect that that pattern should continue. If you've always scrolled on your phone in bed for years, if you've always scrolled for like an hour or something before going to sleep, your brain will assume that that is the quote unquote normal way to go to bed. This is just what we do. Now, just like we start sweating when we're overheated or shivering when we're really cold, right? The body is resisting that change. There is resistance to our behavioral shifts too. So if we are trying to wake up earlier, we probably feel that nudge to the comfort of hitting snooze and continuing to sleep if that is the pattern we're used to. If we're trying to leave our phone in the kitchen or the bathroom overnight rather than bringing it into the bedroom and scrolling for that hour, there may be some resistance. Your brain may throw in some really compelling thoughts. Your brain might think, but I need my phone. I need an alarm. Although we could totally use that regular alarm clock that's sitting in the closet. Or your brain might just offer some doubts like, well, I mean, what's the point? I've tried to leave my phone in the kitchen before. This just isn't going to work. This is your brain doing what it thinks is best because that's what we've been doing for so long. It doesn't really care if the old pattern, that old behavior isn't really helping you anymore. What it really cares about is that it's predictable and familiar. Right? It wants to focus on what's familiar. So just like our body maintains that physical stability, it shivers when we're cold to warm us up, it sweats when we're hot to cool us down, we get hungry when we need to refuel. Just like our body loves that regular stability, our brain loves to keep our behavioral patterns comfortable and familiar as well. So again, whether that's your sleep schedule or your daily routines, even your self-identity in the way that we think, well, I'm just not a morning person, or I'm just not someone who can follow a schedule. We all have kind of this version of homeostasis working to keep things the same, even when part of us actively wants the change. And I want to kind of underline and bold that because that can be so frustrating. We sit there and we're thinking, I want this. Why is this so hard? And we're fighting with ourselves. It actually feels like we're fighting, and we kind of are because we're fighting against the behavioral change. Okay. And this is why breaking habits or adopting new habits often seems a bit like we're pushing against this invisible force field. And it's because we kind of are. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about this, because at first it seems a little counterintuitive. If you want to make some sort of a change, why would it seem so ridiculously challenging to do, especially if we slow down and we get a really compelling why and we make sure it's a full body yes, not just some sort of intellectual should. Shouldn't it be a little easier? Well, the first thing to understand is that we're essentially working against millions of years of evolution. So there's that. Humans are biologically wired to seek pleasure because pleasure means survival, avoid pain because pain is danger or death, and conserve energy because if we put in a lot of effort, we could risk depleting ourselves and then die. Let's be just super blunt, okay? So every time we are trying to change, we are challenging at least 2, if not 3, of all of those survival instincts, okay? New habits require more effort, which is breaking that rule where we're trying to conserve energy. New habits are often, usually, pretty uncomfortable. And when that's uncomfortable, it's triggering the avoid pain response. And then if we're letting go of old coping strategies like scrolling or something before bed, that's removing dopamine rewards, which challenges our seek pleasure, right? So we're really kind of challenging all 3 of these core instincts. So if the brain's primary job is to keep us safe and it's trying to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy, no wonder when we're trying to adopt new things, there's some resistance. And one of the core ways that the brain does this is by sticking with what it knows. The neural pathways that we have used for years as we've established our habits and our beliefs and our routines, these are so deeply ingrained. They're well-packed paths in deep snow, okay? We've walked over them a lot and they're very well worn. Now, any attempt to stray from those familiar trails requires so much effort. And it often feels really uncertain. And because of that, it's going to set off a bunch of mental alarms, even if the change is good, even if we really want it to happen. If you think about it, if you think about stepping off a really well-packed snowy path into knee-deep snow, even though you want to go to a different part of a field or something, right? If you get off the packed path into knee-deep snow, that is a huge shift, and it takes so much more work to walk through those 2 or 3 feet of snow than the packed path. And the same is true when we're trying something new and rewiring those neural pathways. So this is one of the reasons why the brain feels so much resistance, and it often offers thoughts like, oh, this is too hard, or it will quickly revert back to the old patterns and we'll go, oh, I'll just start again on Monday. Our brain is defaulting to what's known and what's easy. So when you think about creating that new habit, you're having to essentially create a new path, stamp down a whole bunch of really deep snow for it to stick. Let's actually move away from snow. Okay, let's bring in warmer weather analogies. It is April, no more snow. If you think about the brain as this dense forest, okay, let's go there instead. The trails that you've walked the most, those habits, they're super clear and easy. Whether they're habits you want to keep or not, they're still habits, and they're probably quite well worn. You've really walked through all of the brush from that forest. But the paths that you want to create, they're probably pretty overgrown. They're probably pretty messy, pretty difficult to navigate. However, every time that you repeat that new habit, you strengthen that pathway. But again, at first, it's super tiring because your brain has to consciously work harder. It has to deliberately make choices against what used to be automatic. And because the brain prioritizes efficiency, it's going to try and pull you back to that original well-worn path that you always travel. So again, this is why change initially feels so exhausting. But I also want to pause here and remind us that it doesn't mean it's impossible. So I'm not trying to be super gloom and doom here. I'm not trying to make your brain start thinking, okay, thanks for the good news here, Paula. Guess I'm never going to establish a new habit. Great. Happy Monday. Okay, that's not what I'm here to do. But I do think it's really empowering to know what we're working with and to actually have an understanding of what's going on and why things do feel hard and kind of get a glimpse into what's happening so we can figure out how to work with it. Because for many of us, certainly when I first started to get kind of serious about goal setting and trying to adopt new routines and things, anytime that I hit resistance and I would skip a day or I might fall back into my old patterns, my brain immediately went to, well, you failed again. I mean, obviously, what did you expect? This always happens. You never stick to anything. But once I realized what I was working with, it really helped me to understand what's happening from a whole different perspective. It helped me realize that, number one, feeling that discomfort doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing something wrong. It means my brain is doing its job. Thanks, brain, for working, for trying to keep me safe, right? Number two, it also helped me learn that that resistance I'm feeling isn't a sign of failure. It's instead confirmation that we're stepping outside of our comfort zone. Yes, you're doing something new. Of course, there's resistance. And it also helped me remember, number three, our brain isn't fighting us because we're not, good enough at change or something. The brain is fighting us because it's trying to protect what's familiar. Again, back to number one, your brain is working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So instead of seeing resistance as some sort of stop sign, I started thinking about it as more of a checkpoint, kind of a moment to check in with myself, make sure I do indeed want to make this change. Is it a full body yes? And then if so, I'd remind myself, hey, nothing's gone wrong here. This resistance that we're feeling, it's a sign that we are rewiring our old patterns. We're doing something different. It makes sense that it feels hard. So the next time you notice yourself perhaps slipping back into something that's familiar or going back to an old pattern, I invite you to remind yourself, okay, my brain isn't working against me intentionally. It's just trying to keep things stable. And that means I'm in the process of changing. Because the more you keep walking that new path, the easier that change is going to get. And eventually the new habit or belief or routine becomes default. So we understand that our brain resists change because it wants that familiarity. It wants the stability. It wants to conserve energy, avoid pain, seek pleasure. Okay. And I want to share one more analogy from Gay Hendricks that I think really puts this concept into focus quite well. And he shares this in his book called The Big Leap. And I will link to it in the show notes. I've probably mentioned it before. But in this book, he explains how our resistance to change is a little bit like having this internal thermostat for things like success or happiness or productivity or personal growth. So again, if you imagine having that thermostat set in your home to, 70 degrees or something, if the temperature rises above that, the sun comes in through the window or the oven's been on or something, the thermostat kicks in to cool things down. If it drops too low, a cold draft comes in or something, the heat turns on, it warms things up. Now we can apply that same concept to our comfort zone of growth. We all have what Hendricks talks about as our internal set point. It's that level of comfort for how much success or happiness or achievement that we actually allow ourselves to experience before it gets too uncomfortable. And when we push beyond that set point, whether through personal growth or financial success or just feeling, quote unquote, too good in our lives. I know that sounds strange, but check this. I bet you could find it. When we get to those moments, our brain can subconsciously find ways to kind of bring us back to that familiar baseline, that set point, that comfortable temperature of 70 degrees. Now, Gay Hendricks describes this as self-sabotage, when we procrastinate or we create distractions or we suddenly feel too busy to keep up with the new habit or the new opportunity or whatever. I actually see it a little bit differently. I don't actually believe in the idea of self-sabotage in the way that people talk about it. I actually think that the brain is genuinely trying to help. It's doing what it thinks is best. It's not trying to ruin things. It's just a little bit confused. It actually thinks it's in danger. It misunderstands that stepping outside of our comfort zone, it's actually safe to do. And when we start to expand beyond our familiar limits, the brain kind of assumes, oh no, something must be off. So it gently, or sometimes dramatically, pushes us back to what feels stable, what feels familiar. So this is why you might hit that streak of productivity and you might feel on fire with momentum. And then suddenly you find yourself prioritizing everyone else's projects instead of your own. Or maybe you start seeing real progress on some goal that you set for yourself. Things are moving forward, success feels within reach, and then suddenly all that doubt creeps in. And you're thinking, ugh, but who am I to do this? Am I really capable of following through here? Again, I don't see this as self-sabotage. I don't think your brain is intentionally trying to sabotage you. I think your brain thinks it's protecting you. And it's trying to get you back to your comfort zone, your set point. The brain is, it's running an outdated safety protocol. And it's saying, hey, this is different. Are you sure we should be doing this? And that's where the other part of us needs to step in. So rather than fighting against this experience or seeing it as some failure, we can gently remind our brain, no, it's okay. It's okay to adjust the thermostat. So how do we do that? How do we adjust that internal set point? How do we start creating more lasting change without triggering that resistance to pull us back so strongly? It's going to come as no surprise that my first suggestion is to start ridiculously small. If the brain senses too much change too fast, it will panic and it will pull us back. So the solution will be to start small. Make sure that the shifts are so tiny that they fly under the radar of your internal thermostat. So if you want to start exercising, instead of committing to a 45-minute workout, start with, 30 seconds of stretching before bed. If you want to read more, open a book and read for 1 minute or read one paragraph or something. That's it. If you're building a new morning routine, start with just one tiny habit. Pour your coffee and then take one slow breath before you move on with your day. Again, we talked about this in last week's episode when we looked at the concept of habit stacking. But these small behaviors, they often sound almost too small to even matter, to even count. But that's the point. When change feels nearly effortless, so small it doesn't count, your thermostat probably won't react. And then secondly, let's normalize the discomfort as evidence of change. So if you're feeling that resistance or that doubt or that frustration, again, it's not a sign that you're failing, that you're doing it wrong. It's actually a sign that you are pushing past your old set point. So if you're starting to put yourself out there, maybe at work or in relationships or in a personal goal or something, and suddenly you feel exposed and you just want to retreat, again, that's your thermostat at work. So if you're growing into this new version of yourself and your brain starts throwing out all those thoughts like, well, who do you even think you are? Again, proof that you're stretching past your baseline. Now, of course, we don't want to just push ourselves all the way out there. As I mentioned, I think we want to do this incredibly gently. That's why we're starting small. I actually like to use the analogy of a rubber band. Okay, we want to stay in the stretchy zone. We don't want to snap that rubber band. So when we're stretching ourselves to grow, we are not stretching to the point of snapping that rubber band. We are staying in the stretchy. Okay? If we stay within that safe, healthy stretch, then instead of seeing discomfort as some sort of red flag where we need to retreat, we can instead check in. And again, if it's something that you genuinely want to do, if it feels values aligned, I encourage you to reframe that discomfort to, this feeling means I'm expanding my set point. In other words, instead of fighting against our internal thermostat, we can work with it. We can ease into change rather than forcing some sort of massive overhaul. We can recognize the resistance for what it is as this signal that we're growing, not as a clear stop sign. And we can gradually shift that set point until what once seemed impossible now just seems like second nature. So if you've ever found yourself on that verge of a big change, but then you hit a huge amount of resistance, I encourage you to pause and ask yourself, what if this isn't a stop sign? What if this is proof that I'm expanding my set point? Because with a little bit of time and attention and allowing yourself to practice those tiny shifts, you can absolutely reset your thermostat to match that life you're working to create. So as you move through your week, I invite you to notice, where do I feel that internal thermostat kicking in? Maybe it's around a personal goal you've been working toward, or a new morning routine you're building, or maybe it's more broad. It's allowing yourself to experience more success or rest or happiness than usual. Rather than seeing the resistance as a stop sign, I encourage you to see it as that gentle checkpoint, a moment to pause, to check in, and to remind yourself, I'm working towards something I want. This is a sign that I'm growing. I'm leaning into the growth edge. I'm busy being awesome. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you are ready to take these concepts and apply them to your life, if you are ready to learn how to support your ADHD in a way that works best for you, I invite you to check out today's show notes where you can learn more about how we can work together, both in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome, and through one-on-one coaching. Also, if you know someone who would love to learn a little bit more about expanding their set point, would you be a rock star and share this episode with them? You could send it to them in a text message or snap a screenshot and share it on your Instagram stories. And if you do that, be sure to tag me at I'm Busy Being Awesome so I can give you a shout out. Whatever you do, please know that I so appreciate you for tuning in and for helping me get these strategies to even more busy, awesome brains who need them. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.